Welcome to the Read, Talk, Grow podcast, where we explore health topics through books. Our topic is joy and happiness. Our book is The Happy Life of Isadora Bentley by Courtney Walsh. I'm your host, Dr. Denise Milstein. I'm an assistant professor of medicine at Mayo Clinic, where I practice women's health, internal medicine, and integrative medicine, and am the medical director for joy and well-being at Mayo Clinic in Arizona. I'm so excited about this important topic and my guests. Courtney Walsh is the Carroll Award winning author of several low spice, small town romance novels. She's committed to creating stories that bring joy and always promises a happy ending. Courtney lives with her husband and three children in Illinois, where she co owns a performing arts studio and youth theater with her business partner and best friend, her husband. She published The Happy Life of Isadora Bentley in 2023. Courtney, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Anni Shandera-Ochsner is an assistant professor of psychology at Mayo Clinic and a board certified clinical neuropsychologist at Mayo Clinic Health System in Wisconsin. She directs the Mayo Clinic Healthy Action to Benefit Independence in Thinking or Habit program for the Midwest region for people with mild cognitive impairment. And she is the medical director of Joy for all of Mayo Clinic. Annie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Just delighted to be here and to speak with both of you.
The Happy Life of Isadora Bentley is a contemporary novel that follows university researcher Isadora Bentley after she impulsively buys a magazine featuring an article titled 31 Ways to Be Happy and decides to test its claims through a personal experiment. As she methodically works through the list, she has to stretch outside her comfort zone and connect with others in new ways. Okay, you both know how Read Talk Grow works. We discuss books that portray health topics in an effort to better understand health experiences and conditions that impact health through story. In this case, we'll focus on happiness, especially whether it's something that happens or needs to be pursued. Courtney, tell us your inspiration for Isadora and her book.
Well, I think the inspiration came when my husband actually asked me the question, when are you happy? What makes you happy? Not in a mean way, but like in a way where like, when are you the happiest? And as I sat and thought about it, I couldn't really think of anything. I mean, there's the obvious things, but I really love my work and I really love watching my kids do what they love. But like in terms of me as a human, as a person, as a woman, I was like, I couldn't really think of anything. And I think when you get to be a certain age, you sort of let some of those pursuits go. Well, at least I did. I shouldn't generalize. I was letting some of those pursuits go by the wayside a little bit, maintaining friendships or doing things that were outside my comfort zone or getting a hobby. I mean, that's one of the things recently where I've been like, I think I need a hobby. Like, I need to be really bad at something so I can like experience the challenge and the joy of learning something new. So once he asked me that, I like to explore using story. And so that was one of the things where I really wanted to explore the idea of a woman who was on that kind of a journey where she just was trying to figure out if she could ever be happy and why happiness was always eluding her. And so I set her in an academic setting and made her very regimented and black and white and kind of a lot put a lot of myself into her, but ended up feeling like at the end, she was like my fourth child that I just wanted to give a big hug to, you know, because I think she needs a hug. But yeah, that's kind of where it came from was just a simple question.
That's so fantastic. We've heard many authors talk about wanting to explore topics and their own health experiences by fictionalizing it and really how that allows them to delve into it in their own way. Annie, tell us your impression of the book and share with our listeners about your role in Joy at Mayo Clinic.
Sure. So I really enjoyed the book. I did the Audible version actually because I realized that I've learned that about myself with reading, right? That I need to access all of my time, and that's often done through Audible. So I enjoyed it, and I like the narrator's voice for Isadora because a lot of her personality came out through that. So actually, I thought it was interesting to read in the context of my work at Joy at Mayo Clinic because in some ways, like her going through the steps, all these 31 steps to become happy and finding ultimately that it's not necessarily about the steps, but who you're doing those steps with really connects a lot with our framework for joy at Mayo Clinic. Sometimes in the midst of trying to do some of this work, and I know Denise, you probably feel this too, you're wondering if some of these initiatives you're coming up with, like, are these going to resonate with staff? And sometimes this feels like a trivial thing to do in the midst of like all these other things people are dealing with, especially in a healthcare setting. But we know that some of this is just fundamental to human happiness and well-being. So the things that we focus on at an enterprise level are what we call the three core features of joy. And these came through listening sessions with our staff. So these are things that really can weave throughout the story as well. I think these are meaningful connections with other people, and that was clearly a theme. Moments that spark positive emotion, and often those are things that catch us by surprise. How can we schedule spontaneity for the staff um, so that we can provide those? And then the last one is the affirmation of an individual's value. For us, we think about it, what's their value to Mayo Clinic? Are they feeling like they're someone who is not just a cog in the wheel? It matters that they themselves are there at work. And so I also saw that with Isadora's journey at work, finding that her value among her colleagues and sort of what unique role does she play. I think that really came out for her as she embraced who her true self was and those connections with other people. So I thought it really came together quite nicely with what we're working on and what was helpful themes from your story.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
great. I can just imagine you then taking the physical copy of the book and being like, there's a meaningful connection. There's a moment that sparks, and we'll talk about a couple of those. That's fantastic. Maybe it should be a signed reading for
Yes.
all of the people who work in this space. But Courtney, at the beginning of the novel, we see Isadora, and I think in my mind, she was content, or she kind of thought she was. She wasn't searching to be happier. In fact, she wasn't sure she needed to or even wanted to be happier. She just stumbles upon this magazine. She's buying junk food, a lot of junk food for her 30th birthday. She's intending to eat alone in her apartment. She's really disdainful and skeptical of this list and the woman who wrote the article. So she's a researcher and she decides, like, is this actually going to work? Really, she sets out to prove that it's foolish and that it wouldn't work.
Mhm.
Do you think that she'd given up on whether or not she could be happy or should be happy, or happiness was something for her to strive for herself and maybe even for other people?
Yeah, I think in her situation, and I think maybe a lot of people feel this way, it's, you're watching things go other people's way. And I think, like with social media, that's very prominent where it's so easy to look all around and go, well, what about me? Why isn't that happening for me? Instead of going, look at all the great things that are in my life. And I think I have to really check myself on that. I think we all do regularly. And I think that in the case of this character, that was something that she struggled with. And I think there comes a point where you just kind of, you're like, well, I guess this is it. I guess this is what life is going to be like. And you forget that, like, little changes can make a really big difference down the road. So I wanted to show some big changes and some little changes with her. But yeah, I think at the beginning of the story, she's really in a place of just being kind of resigned to, this is how my life is, and things don't go for me the way that they do for other people. And she's just kind of mired in that, I think.
Yeah, I love how you said that. She just decides that this is what it's going to be and there's nothing really wrong. She actually likes her work and she has a home, but Annie, the first step of the list is to smile more, which Isadora finds kind of silly and then realizes that it's a lot more difficult than she thought it was going to be. Do you think that's one of these simple steps towards happiness?
I do. And part of this is going to, of course, tap into my neuropsychologist part of my role. But, we have mirror neurons. So when we express those type of facial expressions that express emotion, we're drawn to mirror that when we see that in another person. And then we're instantly sparking that connection back and forth between two humans. And so I think it's actually a super powerful, easy step that people can do. And yes, she finds, that she looks like she's grimacing at first and that it's not natural and that doesn't have the intended effect on other people. But then when she masters it, she notices that it's happening more often. And there's some cool research that once we start engaging in little steps toward experiencing positive emotion or noticing positive things, then that has this, what's been coined the upward spiral of positive emotion. And we just notice more and we experience it more and it builds on itself. And I think you did a great job illustrating that, Courtney, in your main character.
Thank you so much.
Was that what you were thinking, Courtney, when you had Isadora meet Marty in the park and she finds herself smiling automatically? Were you like, there's her mirror neurons? Or
Yeah, well, and you know what? You know where I think that came from? Do you remember in 2020 when anytime you did leave the house, you couldn't see anyone's face? And I can distinctly remember in Illinois when they lifted the mask mandate, and I went to the grocery store and I really didn't even need anything. I just wanted to be people. And I mean, I'm an introvert, but I still like, I needed that human connection. And I remember walking down the aisles and like, there was an old lady and she smiled at me and I smiled at her. And I feel like we both were like, we made it, and there's like just that connection. And I think sometimes that particular one can get misconstrued. I mean, it's kind of a joke in our family, even, oh, just smile more, you'll be fine. But I really do think that when you have the absence of that, like what you're saying, mirroring with other people, there's so much value to it. So, yeah, I did want to keep it in there for her because I think also when you're a serious person, you may not realize that you're not smiling at people and being inviting and warm. And so in her case, I think as she warmed up to people, that just kind of naturally came out.
well, and also there's 31 steps. It's not like just smile and that's how you
Right.
find happiness. There are other
Right.
steps that then
And you're good.
follow
Yeah.
from
Right.
that. So I already mentioned Marty, who's an older man that Isadora meets in the park or the courtyard outside where she works. She smiles at him and he approaches her and they start to have this lovely relationship where they are having lunch together on a regular basis. But while she's talking to her the first time, she says that he makes her laugh and she feels a flutter in her chest and then asks, Happiness? Is that you? And I was wondering, Courtney, how much you thought about the physical symptoms of happiness, the physiology that we feel when we are feeling happy.
It's interesting because it's somewhat foreign for me. I mean, I tend to be kind of on the cynical side, and this is part of why I wrote the book is because my natural bent is toward pessimism. And so hearing what you're saying, it's really fascinating to me to just hear everything you were saying before. I mean, I'm trying to like absorb as much as I can because I really do feel like when you're more aware, because I think we get so busy and we're just going through our life. And when you're more aware, there are physiological responses. And my example of smiling at the woman in the grocery store, just connecting with people, I feel like maybe don't even realize it, but it does have such an effect on you, body, mind, and soul. I think the whole of it. I definitely think I wanted that to play a part in this character.
Annie, I was wondering if you had a framework in your head for what is happiness, or maybe because you work in joy, you've talked about components that promote joy, but is it a feeling? Is it a state of being? What is happiness?
Yeah. Yeah. I think joy is part of happiness, but I think so is satisfaction and contentment, which are probably longer lasting feelings. I think joy can be one of those short bursts that's pretty intense, but not necessarily so long lasting, right? If we feel joy for hours at a time, I think that's a clinical condition called mania. And so in our normal state, it's a briefer but more intense experience. And then underneath that, if you're generally happy, I think it feels more like satisfaction and contentment in your life, that things are as they should be and that things are generally good and going well I think that gives us this ability, plays into our resilience because as we encounter stressors or things that inevitably, for no one's life is going all the time great. But I think for somebody who has happiness as their primary default emotional state, their resilience is way up here. And so when things happen, the way that they characterize that stressor within the context of their larger emotional well being is that this is something I can handle. I can make it through this. And I look at everything else that I still have that's going well.
That's so interesting. And I guess when I hear you say people with happiness as their default emotional state are more resilient, what are your thoughts, again, as a neuropsychologist, for people who set an intention towards happiness? Maybe it's not their default, but they're actually kind of like Isadora working toward it.
Yeah.
Do you think that's also a way to promote resilience?
I do. As Isadora finds, it brings us back to the way that these emotions spiral on top of each other. And, we're literally training our brains to focus on positive things. The more we look for that intentionally, our brain loves to stay on one track, right? And it gets into its default state. And so if we train it to look for the good, we're going to notice more and more good. And I think that does happen for the main character. These things were always right there, right? Like the neighbor across the way. She didn't have to really do anything to create a nice neighbor across the way that was there, but she did have to engage in like eye contact and
Right.
make some verbal responses to her. It was kind of self-sustaining, right? I think you demonstrate the role that people's past experiences play too. So for Isadora, it's not surprising how she got to where she is, right? She didn't have a lot of warm, nurturing relationships to teach her how to connect with other people or that other people wouldn't let her down. And some people are very fortunate to have had that from the start. And I think that allows them to be more likely to be in that default state. But it's attainable. It's attainable for the character and it's attainable for all of us. It reminds me of another wonderful read, The Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, in that he demonstrates really that you can truly be in any situation and find things that can bring you joy, can bring you peace, and there's always a way to look for those bright spots no matter the situation.
That's really powerful. I was going to ask you, Courtney, what your thoughts were about the traumatic experiences that Isadora had. During the book, she's going through these steps and she's making progress, and then she'll remember whether it was a past boyfriend or the mean girls that she dealt with at school or even her mother. Do you think those past traumas really present a barrier and an impasse for many people to find happiness and pursue happiness?
I really do. I mean, for me, it's interesting because in creating characters, sometimes when you're putting things in their backstory and there's, dark moments in their backstory, I find that sometimes when I put them in those formative years when the kid is, growing up, it can feel like I've gotten this feedback every once in a while. Well, shouldn't they be over that already? I just really believe that sometimes, and I don't necessarily know if there's like a specific age range or what, but there's certain things that they do really shape you and they shape how you see the world or what your perception of other people are. When you have people that consistently let you down or aren't living up to their word, that has an effect. And I think that was the case with this character is just kind of learning ultimately, I don't really have anyone who values me. And I think that came directly from her traumatic experiences in her past because that was the message she kept getting. Now, does that mean she'll never have anybody that doesn't value her? No. And I think that was one of the things about this is sort of a found family story where it doesn't have to necessarily be people that you're growing up with or people that you're blood relation to. It can be people that are like your neighbor across the way. It can be somebody who you run into at work. I didn't do that on purpose, but as I was writing it, I sort of realized like, what if there were people all around her that will value her? Like you said, she just hasn't engaged with them yet. and putting her in those situations to kind of force her to engage with them. But yeah, I think our past and our history, that all shapes who we are. And it can definitely keep us from putting ourselves out there and okay, I'm going to try again. I'm going to try to make a friend. I mean, making friends as adults is so hard. I mean, that is so hard. And so, showing a character that's open to it, I think that's a very vulnerable place to be.
100% agree.
Hey, listeners, we hope you're enjoying this episode of Read, Talk, Grow. If you find our discussions helpful and insightful, please take a moment to subscribe to and rate Read, Talk, Grow on your preferred podcast platform. And don't forget to tell your friends to listen. Your support will help us reach more readers and those eager to learn about health through books. As always, feel free to drop us a line at readtalkgrow@mayo.edu with suggestions for books, topics, or any comments. Thanks for listening. Yeah, I really love how you said that. I think that's really important. And it's not like she's sitting around reconsidering the mean girls in high school. It's that when she goes to the yoga class, I think this is the scene where it comes up, and she's made friends with Darby, her neighbor, and then Darby's friends join her. She thinks Darby is gonna just shun her, and so she remembers, she makes the connection, and that's part of, I think, why people protect themselves into these insular lives where they're no longer open or as open to the hurts, but they pay a cost because they lose the healthiness of happiness that comes by pursuing that.
Yeah, and I think your past sort of makes you expect things to go a certain way. If you're in the yoga class and you have a friend and she has other friends, and in the past you've been sort of ditched, she's expecting that again. And so I wanted to show Isadora that not everybody's going to be like that. Come sit with me. We'll hang out, that kind of thing. And I really wanted to just kind of heal some of that in her because I don't know. I would hope that the mean girls don't stick around forever.
I thought it was a poignant scene, and especially for women, right? Girls go through a rough spot socially, I think more so than guys do sometimes in middle school and figuring out these social structures. And so I think it was a good illustration of, for a lot of women, you realize with your adult friendships, it's so different. And if you have a daughter, you can guide them toward it. It's not always going to be like this. And I think she finds that in that yoga scene.
So Annie, Isadora's love interest in the book, because we know we're talking to a romance author. Not that this book is necessarily categorized as romance, but Courtney comes with that background for the listeners who haven't read her other books. But Annie, her love interest is Dr. Cal Baxter. What a name. And Cal seeks Isadora's support to work on his book, which is about connections and the impact of technology, both for good and for bad. I'm guessing you have some opinions on technology and connectedness.
Yeah, I think in general, we find that technology has the potential to connect us to people we otherwise wouldn't, like the three of us talking right here. This would have been very difficult to bring us from Arizona, Wisconsin, and Illinois um, without technology. And we're connecting, and we'll always remember this. And though, when we use technology to connect with people who we otherwise could connect with in person, it tends to often be a takeaway from the richness and spontaneity of that connection. I think we see this in the workplace with the majority of meetings being virtual rather than in person, even when those people are close by. It's hard for people to have spontaneous chit chat in a Zoom call because it feels like you got to get down to business. And so there aren't those side conversations where people would get to know one another or strike up just some side discussion about a shared interest, for example. So I think we have to be careful about how we balance our time on technology with other people versus our time in person. I imagine we will see a shift that's a bit more balanced in the future in workplaces as well as in people's personal lives with just prioritizing that in-person connection.
I really like how you presented it in a balanced way, Courtney, because I think we hear a lot of criticism about technology and what it does to our connections, how we have these friends online, how we are seeking clicks, but that you actually can make friends online if you have maybe your new shared hobby. You might not have anybody in your direct community who also wants to do whatever that hobby is, and you can actually connect with people who are interested in that. So I really like how you balanced that. Was that difficult to do?
I work from home and I'm by myself a lot because I do, as a writer, it's pretty solitary. It's a weird kind of catch 22. On the one hand, it's like most of my best friends are people that I don't live in the same state as them. And so there's that, which, we have an app called Voxer, and we talk on Voxer, and I talk in real time to them throughout the day. I mean, I was going to say all day long, because some days that really is how it feels. So on the one hand, I'm so grateful for it. But on the other hand, when my husband and I own this performing arts studio and youth theater, and when I go there, I realize that this in real life presence is super important to me in a completely different way. And so I did want to kind of show the balance of both. It's kind of like what you said. It's like it's not all bad, it's not all good. There's really good things and there's really not so good things. And it's just kind of like I feel like our pendulum is like one way. And I am hoping you're right that it swings back and it just kind of evens out and we all kind of figure this thing out a little bit better, because it was so new for a while, and now it's like, okay, but also let's see some people in real life and smile at people in the grocery store and that sort of thing, because I do think it's really important.
Should we talk about the steps? I feel like we should talk about the steps for sure. Annie, there's some easy steps that Isadora chooses to start with initially. So those are to get more exercise or get regular exercise, to focus on sleep, to clear her clutter, to breathe. Do you think all of those are important to happiness, or are any more important than others?
Well, I'm going to have to single out physical exercise, and I imagine you would agree with me. Just, there's really nothing that physical exercise doesn't help with, and that would be both for the mind and the body. So I think if people were trying to start with one of those, just a very simple beginner's walking plan or something like that, getting yourself out into nature, getting your body moving often feels like a brain transplant for people.
Hmm.
And so I think that's a huge one. And there are a lot of people who I think their default would be, I don't like working out. And that sounds terrible. And I think that was Isadora's first
Yeah.
thought too. I think oftentimes it's that there are actually other things in the way. It's not really the physical exercise itself, but there's concerns about going to a gym and being the least fit person there and feeling sort of shame or isolation socially. There's not knowing exactly what to do or feeling, having too high of expectations, but just getting going and starting small, I think is a huge one. And we know actually literally produces those good brain chemicals that boost mood.
I love, Courtney, how you give her the yoga instructor who doesn't discourage her from practicing yoga, but essentially says, if this isn't your thing, that's okay too. Find the thing that is your thing and make that what you do. But she chooses to stay with yoga because she starts to like the way she's pushing her body and she's formed these relationships. I'm partial to breathe as a simple step. And the reason is that breathing has never hurt anybody. It's completely free
Yeah.
and it is always available to all of us, whether you're in a meeting, in a heated discussion with somebody you live with, anytime. You can always adjust your breathing and it can be really powerful, which is shocking since it's so available and completely free. But Courtney, at one point, other characters start to get involved in Isadora's project, whether she wants them to or not. But Cal selects one from the list, which is spend time with animals. Why do you think that helps with happiness?
Well, I have a dog, and sometimes she does not help with my happiness. But for the most part, my kids we've had several surgeries. My son actually just had a surgery, and I see the way their countenance changes. And I think there was a pretty tragic event at my kids' school. Two of their classmates were they were killed. And, it was incredibly difficult for the entire community. And they brought dogs in, and they even had dogs at the funeral. I mean, it was amazing, these therapy dogs, and we didn't have a dog at the time. And I just remember seeing the way people interacted with them and seeing how it just helped. And they just know. I mean, there's something about animals that just can, I don't know, they are just so incredibly, somebody said we don't deserve them, and I'm like, I kind of agree. Like, we just don't deserve. And so I really wanted that to be one of the things, because I think in my own life, she adds a lot of value. We didn't get a dog for a really long time because I know we outlive them usually. And the thought of that just kills me. And everybody I know that had a dog was like, but it's worth it. It's so worth it. And I have to agree. So I just think they add so much value to our life. They're just so wonderful, and that unconditional love. And they're just always, I mean, my dog she's like a Velcro dog. She just follows me around. And as a person who works from home by myself and talks to myself a lot, that is kind of really nice. It's like a built-in friend, you know?
Yeah. I mean, what you just said is what Isadora struggled with regard to having friends, right? Or having a romantic
Hmm.
relationship. The pain of losing somebody, she thought was not worth the experience. And I think that's a
Hmm.
good parallel to having a pet, right? You would never not do it, even though we have to go through that pain of them dying.
Hmm.
And similarly, those risks with relationships, she ultimately finds that's worth it.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm sorry your family had to live through that, and I really hope your son recovers from his surgery quickly. We have dogs at the hospital at Mayo and
Yeah.
caring canines, and they're really incredible what they bring to the space, to the room, patients and staff. That's really powerful. So I was glad to see that step as well.
Yeah. They're
Yeah.
they're wonderful. They just add so much. So yeah, I love that.
They never say the wrong thing. And
Yeah. Right. They're such good listeners.
they're good at some of those things that we struggle with when someone
Yeah.
just needs
Yeah.
support, right? Just the presence.
Yeah, for sure.
So true. Annie, you mentioned Darby, who's Isadora's neighbor, and they become friends. But Darby has four children in a small space, and she has this precocious daughter, Delilah, who really becomes attached to Isadora because, in many ways, they're very similar, although very different in ages. And they conquer a step together, which is to sit and to daydream. They find it very difficult. Why is that hard for people?
Yeah. I mean, I think this falls into the same category as mindfulness, right? Sometimes people think, oh, well, I should just do a mindfulness exercise. And then they try it and it's so hard that they never do it again because they think, gosh, I'm terrible at this. But in truth, it's hard for all of us. Our minds are going a million miles an hour and we have so many thoughts. It's really a challenge actually to just focus on one thing and accept the thoughts that come in, the thoughts that go out, and just let them be without trying to control. And I think almost everyone struggles with this without a lot of practice. So it wasn't surprising to me to, to see that they found that to be hard. And yet we know there are some benefits to keeping up with it and keeping trying and just having that non-judgmental attitude is part of that practice. But it's not something that I'm super skillful at either, I have to say.
But if listeners try to do a meditation practice or to take that step daydream and apply it in their own lives and they find it challenging, I think it's great that you made space for that, Courtney, that it's not as easy as it looks. Okay.
No.
I I want to hear from both of you if you have a favorite step. So, one of the steps that we didn't mention already, is it getting out in nature, being in the sun, eating chocolate, spreading encouragement?
The one that just pops into my head when you say that is spend time with quality people. To me, that's where it's at. And that's that meaningful connections. And when you have those people in your life, I think you feel like everything else is going to be okay, right? You know that you can go back to them no matter what else is going on, and you feel that sense of belonging, sense of safety, And that's sort of what really matters, right? Are those people. So that's my favorite step.
I love that step too. And I'm not exactly sure how it's phrased now. I don't have the book in front of me, but the one about letting go. And I think it's really hard for Isadora to let go. And I think it's really hard for a lot of us. But I think when you can actually get to a point where those things that have kind of just like gnawed at you don't have that power over you anymore, it's such a freeing place. I mean, just to be able to let go of that. I think the older I get, the less I don't want to feel conflict with anyone. I maybe when I was younger, I would get my hackles up about something. Now that I'm older, I'm sort of like, I don't really care. That's not a big deal, you know? Like I think you sort of learn that things that felt like such a huge deal, like as you get older, you're sort of like, but it's really not a big deal. And I like to be able to just let go of things as much as possible so that I'm not in conflict with I don't enjoy that, you know? And so I think that's a big one. I do also really like the step about encouraging other people because I think it's important. And I've done that to the point of kind of embarrassing myself because there can be somebody and I can see them and I'll have a thought like I love her hair or I love her shirt or something, and I just kind of made a decision to start telling people when I think those things, which can be kind of awkward. Like, okay, weirdo, thanks. But I think it's important because we think these great things about people and we keep them to ourselves. I would rather just put it out there and be like, maybe make somebody feel a little happy that day, even if I feel a little awkward because of it. So I think that's kind of huge. And you see people change. I mean, we work with kids and you see them change when you're building them up and encouraging them and coming from a place of inspiring them instead of just tearing them down and telling them what they're doing wrong. I love to take it from a positive spin. So I think encouragement is huge.
You picked two, Courtney. We caught you on picking two, but you did choose
I
31 for the
did. I
book. So
did.
that was fair. It's fair that that you couldn't settle on one. But
Yeah, I couldn't. Sorry.
what I love about what you just said, though, and kind of highlighted is a lot of these steps
Mhm.
are vulnerable and they're hard. You think, oh, I want to be happy, so I'll do something that kind of feels like easy, but there's a lot of angst that can come with them to get to the place of happiness. And so hopefully listeners and readers of the book will recognize that to try to push through those parts that are hard about taking those steps. So thank you. All right, let's end on this. I want you both to comment on this quote from Marty. He says, happiness isn't that hard to find, you know. It's everywhere, it's all around us. But it's not something that happens to us, it's something we seek, it's something we pursue, and you'll never find it if you're not letting anyone in.
I mean, I totally agree with him. And, that's where I think no matter what's happening in our lives, we can always look and find moments of joy. We can find a way to connect with somebody. And we have to get our brain on that train track of looking for those positive opportunities. And they're there. It's just a matter of us seeking them out. I think you said it beautifully through Marty's words.
I love Marty. He's so real to me. I can see him and I love everything he taught her and just his whole outlook on life. And it's funny because I actually have a neighbor that kind of reminds me of him, but I just met him this year and I see him on my walks, like we walk the same path. But I think for me, it sounds so simple to say that happiness is a choice. And I don't want to oversimplify it. But I think for me personally, I had to learn that it's a very intentional thing and it's a decision in a lot of ways, sort of like the decision to love somebody. We think that it's all about, oh, it's all romance and all this ooey gooey stuff. But I mean, really to love somebody, it's loving them through the hard stuff and the ugly stuff and the really difficult stuff too. And so I think that's what makes it so wonderful. But for me, like I said before, being kind of a cynic and having a sort of pessimistic side, I have to be very intentional to look, like you said, for those things. And I really wanted Isadora to learn that if you open yourself up, and ultimately, I really do believe that a lot of it comes from the people, like you said, with the quality people that you're spending time with, then it is there. It doesn't mean that all your problems are going to go away. And it doesn't mean that the hard stuff isn't going to still affect you and still be really hard. but there can be joy in the midst of all of that and happiness in the midst of all of that. I loved what you said about the difference between happiness and joy too. I had never thought of it that way. And I thought that was really profound, actually. So yeah, I like those words that he said. And I try to learn them repeatedly. A lot of these times it's like these characters are actually teaching me.
Well, it takes a reminder, and that's why it's so wonderful that your book is in the world. I want to thank you both for joining me to talk about the happy life of Isadora Bentley on Read Talk Grow. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Read Talk Grow is a product of the Women's Health Center at Mayo Clinic. This episode was made possible by the generous support of Ken Stevens. Our producer is Lisa Speckhard-Pask, and our recording engineer is Rick Andreessen. Visit our show notes to see the books discussed today and for links to other health education materials. Follow us on social media like Instagram and Facebook, or reach out directly to our email, readtalkgrow@mayo.edu, with suggestions for books or topic ideas. We'd love to hear from you. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not designed to replace a physician's medical assessment and judgment. Information presented should not be relied on as medical advice. Please contact a healthcare professional for medical assistance if needed for questions pertaining to your own health. Keep reading, everyone.